Hello, my name's Steve Jaguar.
And I'm Mike Foster.
Welcome to our show. This is a curated visual newsletter for your impatient world. And in the show, it summarizes cybersecurity, Kubernetes, cloud native, and tools for your automation pleasure.
Yeah, speaking of all the security and tools, we got a cool show coming up. We're going to be taking a look at Copilot by GitHub. We're going to be talking a little bit about declarative security and securing Ansible, a bunch of CVEs over the past 2 weeks. So looking forward to the show. Welcome to Yeah, it's a show about K8s and stuff. We got a ton of a big lineup, packed show for y'all.
I got to improve that tagline now.
I mean, it's K8s and stuff is spot on. Yeah, if you like what you're watching, if you're on Twitch, give us a follow, throw us a comment. We're on YouTube if you want to check out the rest of the videos, all timestamped because we have tons of content. General news, CVEs, things that make you go WTF.
Yep. What have you? Yeah. Did we do intros? I'm Steve Jaguar. You did that, Mike Foster. We took a week off. We took a week off because last week. By the way, happy Nunavut Day for our viewers in very northern Canada. We took a week off because it was Canada Day and America Day and whatever day last weekend. So we were celebrating, etc. Would you do anything cool?
I was in Montreal for a bit. I got to just experience the sadness of the French Canadians firsthand as the Canadians lost the Stanley Cup. So I rubbed that in, but yeah, it was a good weekend. What'd you get up to, Steve?
Mostly the same. They don't celebrate Canada Day or America's Independence Day in England, as you can imagine.
Shocking.
Particularly heartily. But, I did celebrate in my own way, and I did also watch the Montreal Canadiens lose the Stanley Cup by a much better team comprised of 17 Canadians who live in Tampa.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing in Canada where we look at which team has the most Canadians and then we bet on that team to win the Stanley Cup. So anyways, into the craziness.
Should we get cracking?
Yeah, right, it's been an interesting week. Yeah, we can start off with some Ansible talk. We're going to talk declarative security and a little bit about securing your Ansible modules. Side note, it's been kind of a quiet time in the corporate world. More CVEs and more craziness, but not a lot of big announcements in the last 2 weeks, which is understandable, obviously.
No, we found them, though. We dug deep.
Yeah, we did.
This is right up your street. I would imagine you're a big Ansible fan.
Yes. Big, just, I consider Ansible declarative. I mean, it uses YAML. One of the differences between Ansible and Terraform is just the way it handles. It's a little bit more flexible in how it handles packages and package management. The big play of Ansible is that it just uses SSH for configuration. It's agentless. So, you declare your modules, they're reusable. You just need to have the setup on your server. I personally use Ansible for my home server. It's a lot easier to just say, hey, SSH into my pre-configured server and set this up, or uninstall the packages. Whereas Terraform, you have to do some sort of local exec to take it back. But obviously the issue with that is package management is key when interacting with servers like this. Most of the time, people will use some sort of control hub. I forget what they want to call it, but it's like a control hub for Ansible. So you'll have a server that has all your modules, and then that server will go and configure your environment, sort of a group area where like you might have secrets, or you have to inject secrets when you're trying to configure your packages. Anyway, so that whole setup can create, if it's not configured properly, can create a security hazard. So this is just talking about how you manage your playbooks and some top tips for Ansible security audits. Understanding how to manage the packages so that you're not just, let's say, pulling the most up-to-date package, that you have specific packages. How do you roll them back with Ansible in the most effective way? Because it is a challenge with declarative tools in general, right?
Yeah, totally. And what I found really fascinating about this is the geek in me coming out, almost like the eBPF element where they use Strace up here. I think that this little bit here, and there's a couple other ones, are really cool. Like, you trust tools like Ansible to do things on your behalf. And he's got a few examples where you can see, well, here's what it's doing. And you see certain options being played out here, and then also down below where he did another version where he uninstalled, as you just mentioned, or he went backwards to something that was a lower risk, and how certain declarations translate to over-enthusiastic results. Like in this case, the force yes essentially on an apt-get install, which means, is it the software we really wanted? Are we checking signatures? Who knows? They said they really wanted it, so I guess we'll say okay. And so it's fascinating. It's fascinating. It's a really good article.
Yeah, it is. And this is just a common problem with package management and things that you can't tear down, right? Like Terraform, for example, in the cloud, it's like, hey, you don't like the VM, make your changes and we're going to scrap it and just redeploy it. And that way you're going to get the state that you want in that VM. When you're interacting with VMs in a more imperative way, you're just going to get this sort of issue with how these tools work, because you want it to work. It's really hard to go in and make changes. And you think about it, in the past 20 years, you basically would just go in and run a script to do the exact same thing, right? That's what Ansible is doing. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting problem. I've personally set up my home server to get away from this by having a USB that I could just plug into the server to just reboot a fresh bare metal install. And that way, like if I screw up and I have some crazy packages on my server, it's just boop, fresh install, ready to go. And it's my declarative way of getting around this. But again, if you're working with something like Terraform in the cloud, you hopefully shouldn't be running into these issues, because you should be using the declarative nature and the APIs of the cloud to get around this. So,
this reminded me of a little bit, right? Was there was, recently there was that, I want to say a Python was one example of the package manager vulnerability where it would look locally, or it was confusing where it would look locally versus publicly. And if people were squatting publicly on local names, so if it was Stephen Foster Limited, and we were using the Steve Foster package, and because it would look public first, if I just scanned your GitHub and found an obscure package name that didn't exist publicly, I could just make that package public, insert my malicious code, and then your pip would install mine instead of yours.
Yep.
And it was some of the things in this article reminded me of that package management conundrum, where it's like, are you sure you're installing what you think? Cool. And plus there's all sorts of man-in-the-middle attack stuff. There's a really good link to a man-in-the-middle attack article from 2 years ago in there. So go check out the YouTube where the links are, and go read that too, because that was really interesting.
You're done.
Alrighty. What's next?
We got money on the mind next. Hey,
My mind on
DSO.
my money.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
mean, just a general topic. The headline's kind of funny.
It's clickbait.
Yeah, it is. I see this all over Reddit at this point. It's just IT in general.
Yeah. How to get this? Obviously, we got excited because we're like, I also would like to have a lucrative job in cybersecurity. And so I directed it. There are some good case studies and stories like Oscar here, just talking about how he got into an internship program and got into cybersecurity, right? You don't have to necessarily make your way through some lengthy university degree in computer science or even cybersecurity, which is largely encryption focused these days. Like, you don't have to do any of that. You can get, if you have the right mindset, you like to break things or you like to fix things, and you're reasonably technically minded, people are popping up lots of internship programs and are thinking laterally about how to fill positions in the cybersecurity domain. So that's the common theme throughout all the different personal stories I found in here.
Yeah, IT just moves so fast. If you're going to go to a school and they're going to tell you what cybersecurity is, it might be outdated. So it's, get those core fundamentals, really understand the day-to-day workflows of your teams, right? I find that that's also one of the biggest aspects. And then, yeah, if you want to get into cybersecurity a little bit later, it's an easier switch than to jump directly in with no hands-on experience for how, teams develop and work, right? And I think to a certain extent, the cloud, APIs, everything's kind of changed a little bit from, I was actually just having a conversation because we were talking about like McAfee and Kubernetes and like malware, which we're going to get into, but there's just been a subtle shift, I think, I wouldn't say shift. There's more layers of extraction now. So there's just more ways that you can fit in and become, let's say, a cybersecurity focused type of individual.
Totally.
Don't look for a single article to tell you what to do.
No, that's probably the key takeaway here, is that article is not probably going to tell you any more than what Foster just said. I mean, cybersecurity. I used to work with a guy named John Stephen, who I think he's the CTO at, I'm going to forget. I'll remember it eventually. He's a very smart guy. He wrote most of Fortify in his early days. So, and I started working with him in about 2015, and the first thing he said was, he's like, I used to know cybersecurity. He's like, now it's impossible. I mean, people in applications security generally have to come from some kind of coding background to understand the attack vectors and misuse cases of static analysis and code. Whereas the best people for cloud security are usually people who are in ops, and they understand declarative programming. Like, so, and then there's the encryption people who are the math whizzes, who are doing all the kind of the underlying detail that we're just using, right? And there's something for everyone.
I mean, there's people who focus solely on OAuth, right? Authentication in the cloud specifically, and managing huge companies at scale. Right? How do you manage a big company that's in AWS? You need to make sure everything's segmented and properly, right?
Yeah, and that just leaves us with like the business aspect of cybersecurity and the establishment of risk, right? That's this person probably wants to come out with an MBA, but also understand the market. Like, and there's hardly any of those people, so lots of options there for you. And speaking of, that was you segue nicely into our discussion of our first discussion of many of malware. Yeah. Last minute entry.
Yeah, last minute I found this little infographic on the state of malware 2021. I found it pretty easy because if you've been watching the show, we've touched on a lot of these topics. What I found interesting is I feel like there's more attacks in general. But is it just because I've been sitting on the internet because of COVID way too much? They came out and said, hey, there's less attacks. But is it less as a percentage of the companies that are on the internet? I couldn't completely take away from that. But yeah, so one of the biggest vectors was health information. Obviously, kind of a good bang for your buck if you're a hacker to get into people's emails and talk COVID misinformation, exploit fear. Bad actors gathering intel. But really, one of the biggest things that you see is very targeted attacks. And repeated attacks too, right? I mean, we just talked last week about, when you pay the ransom, you have an 80% chance of getting hacked again. So
yeah,
um,
I know.
Yeah.
That's one that we can double down on.
Mhm. Yeah, I also think just in general, the opinion of malware is pretty interesting. I received a comment about, what do we secure from malware on Kubernetes? It's just like remote, like just unauthorized code execution. Is that what you're talking about? Because that's a pretty broad subject. If that's what you're trying to secure in Kubernetes, for example. So yeah, there's just so many different services and vectors. And if you're in healthcare or if you're in the cloud, that it really is worthwhile at least understanding your portfolio of risk too, right? If you're on premise, what's your surface area? So I just thought it was interesting to put this in, and it's kind of a cool infographic.
It's good and it's simple. That's pretty cool. Yeah. And you're right. Yeah, just to reiterate, or maybe say the same thing with different words. The understanding the context that of what you need from security is a step often skipped in terms of doing what you have to do. It's not a tick box exercise. You don't just get tools and solve it. You really have to work out what are the threats to you, and that can change based on whether you're in healthcare, whether you're in banking, whether you're, I don't know, whether you're part of a supply chain providing a service to others, like we'll talk about shortly.
Yeah. And one quick thing before we get into the vulnerabilities that I did want to say is there's like a specific view of security. I think that it's a net loss to most companies. It's a cost sink, right? I think it's also the way you approach it. You can get big security tools that try to accomplish everything. You can have small security tools for different stages in the pipeline. And so understanding the whole landscape and the ever shifting landscape is a tall order. But if you do it right, I think that you will get more bang for your buck, so to speak. I think containers is one of the examples of that.
Yeah, totally. All right. That was a good transition. Shall we move on to this?
Yeah, it's disaster. Been a big week with a bunch of these guys.
Now, what starts with the letter C?
I forgot we had that.
Yeah, I did a great job with that one. I'm getting hungry now.
Yeah. All right, so this article is how I found it, but actually let's just skip right to Colossal Cyber Attack Unleashed. I like the title. This is a way better article. This is the Kaseya supply chain attack, mass ransomware event. It says across US companies, but then you found one, was it Sweden or something?
I think it was Denmark.
Denmark, Scandinavia.
Chain.
Yeah. Taken down. It's a big deal. This is Kaseya VSA, a commonly used solution by managed service providers. Yeah, 40,000 customers and growing, because this is now an old article, but it's a good one because of the detail that it goes into. There is a CVE against it, but it is not just a 0-day. So I found another article just before this by Tenable that talks about there's now 3 0 days that have been combined with a form of injection, a form of remote code execution, all in the same product. And I'm guessing some remote research was done on this long before this attack started. So this is just a reservation. Like if you go looking for this CVE, the 2021 30116, you'll just find the NBD and it just says holding. It doesn't talk about what it is yet, because it kind of has to be 100% fixed before.
This is the second link that you have up, because if you scroll down, I think it's Coop in Sweden. 800 stores are closed indefinitely. Their point of sale terminal supplier uses a managed service provider who uses, how do you say it? Kaseya?
I just assumed Kaseya. Yeah. I've not actually heard anybody say it yet.
Yeah, crazy.
Oh, look at the updates. This is a big art. Like, look at this is huge. There you go. I can't read what that says. Co-op in Sweden.
Yeah. So it's
stores down.
tampering with the Microsoft Defender for endpoints. So disable monitoring, disable IPS, disable cloud lookup, disable script scanning. You could do it all. It's a big one.
It's pretty strong. So get in here if you're a malware enthusiast and read this article. And we haven't got the Tenable one up here, but go find just type Kaseya supply chain Tenable, and you'll find another one where they go into a little bit more advanced detail on what it's doing and how it's doing. But this is going to be one of those ones to watch. When we first talked about SolarWinds, 6 months ago, it was one of those things where it's like, it'll die down. And it's like, no, this is maybe as big. And we'll keep seeing it haunt the news for, I think, a little while.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, when you're shutting down that many stores, that's a pretty significant impact.
It's Windows based again. I don't want to throw that out there again, but it's interesting. So this comes back to our theme for 2021. Not that we chose it, but supply chain. Just because you've done all the right things in security does not mean the people you buy software from or you operate software from have done that, or the people they've done. And where does your responsibility stop for you to enforce good cybersecurity practices, not just on yourselves, but on the people you depend on? And there's not a lot of standards for that. And then not a lot of compliance directives necessarily around that yet either. It's just generally a problem. My camera's still focusing on my AT-AT walker behind me. Anyway, I will fix this.
I will say it's also when you look at like cloud service providers, and I've spent too much money not paying attention to VMs that I've created and things like that, you realize that is built into the cost. When you sit there, you're like, okay, well, it might cost a certain amount of money. Security is built in there too, and they have a constant sort of compliance standards, and they have to meet a bunch of standards across the world in different countries. At least for the infrastructure point. Now, if you run your application in a container and your application does some funky things, that's on you. But there is, let's say there's a benefit to paying the money to actually make sure that you're using a provider or doing the right things. And honestly, it's credibility is a big issue in the security space. So sometimes it's worth the upfront money.
Sometimes it's worth it. Yeah.
Sometimes until you get
funny. I think I've said this before, but one of first certification I ever got. This goes back to how to get a job in cybersecurity, which was CSSLP, which was Certified Software Lifecycle Professional, Secure Lifecycle. This the other S. It was all about supply chain. It was like it kind of saw the problem coming, and it really opened my eyes to the fact that all software that comes into your organization, that's just the beginning. It's not about just your pipeline. It's about everything you do and where everything goes afterwards. It's like having security around all of that. That kind of made me realize this is a much bigger problem. I think I did that 5 years ago, and obviously it's still no one's doing it. So
yeah, it's just things move too fast at this point. It's crazy.
You are correct. I added this one because it's geeky, and this is access to a MongoDB. It's a really good read. It's not long. If we give it a good score in terms of the scroll bar size, but it's dense in terms of detail, in terms of the story of somebody going in to check the database. And this, I love the content of the README. All your data is backed up. You must pay us. Well, that's not very much, is it? 0.3 Bitcoin. After 48 hours, it will be leaked, and we'll expose all your data, and you'll contact and tell the GDPR people. But this is awesome. And he just kind of goes through and go, wait a second, that was quick. Like, he knows how big his database is. He's like, how'd you get any data out of my database? And so he creates a map of how long it took, and he's like, what? No way. And so and in the end, he realizes they just dropped his database and threw a ransom note on it. And they hadn't done anything with it. And he was like, right, okay, so here's how long it actually took him, because he had just done a backup to get it all back up and just tell them where to stick it, because it was just a vacant threat. And as you go through, you start to see how they got in and how he reconciles that it was an automation. There isn't even a human behind it. There's just a bot out there looking for a particular way of getting in, looking for this setup and going, oh, okay, I'm going to just drop the database. And this is the Tor exit router, which they used. And so it's a good lesson, because it's not old, it's recent, and it's MongoDB, and it talks about how they got into it. So, and it's a very much a cloud native style of hack. So it's a good story. So this is more of a good read for people who are on the defensive side, to read how this happened.
I feel like alarm bells would have been going off in my head when somebody asks for 0.03 Bitcoin.
That's a weird number, right? I think it's almost like intentionally erroneous.
Yeah, it's like you probably should ask for a little bit more, no? If you have somebody's whole database. Anyways.
I feel like it's just a default average. They don't know really what they have.
It's true. We got to come up with some sort of class for hackers on how to negotiate properly.
Yeah, it's interesting that, well, in the end, what does it say? The firewall enabled diligently kept on a strict allow list with only my internal servers, didn't work on a new server because of Docker. And Docker helpfully inserted allow rule into IP tables, opening up the MongoDB to the world. That was the problem in the end.
Gotcha.
And so it's just interesting that Docker silently overrode his firewall. This is where he's like, what? He didn't know this was going to happen. From an ops perspective, this is a good lesson learned.
Docker and sudo rules. Right? But most people run Docker as part of the sudo group, right?
Yep.
So Docker's got it all.
Docker is the problem.
Docker can do it all. Yeah. All right. So we got another CVE coming up, but this one is a little bit of a weird one. So we're going to put it in the next section.
Yeah. All right. You introduced this one to me via this weird.
Yeah.
repo.
So this is just a repo for showing you if you have this vulnerability. So the print nightmare, there it is, CVE 2021 34527. Print nightmare. So from my understanding, it is using local network to scan for devices on your local network. It then kind of acts as a device on your local network to come in and gain root privileges in Windows. So this whole print nightmare scanner, it's basically a Python script that will go through and test all the devices on the network to see if it has this vulnerability. And so it's out there,
awesome.
Which is pretty cool. By the way, this happened last week. This is already out there. One of the biggest things was Microsoft released the patch as of, I believe, 2 or 3 days ago.
This is the 7th. So yeah.
So fails to fix vulnerability. Microsoft then released a statement yesterday saying, we did fix the vulnerability. You just have your Windows set up to be configured that is insecure. There is a specific setting that has to do with how it registers devices, where it was turned to 0 instead of 1, which means like you're accepting all device connections. Anyways, the reason why I put this in the WTF is the fact that I can't even make sense of it. And I have to like really go do more research. I'm like, do I need to upgrade? Am I secure? What is going on? It just kind of goes to show you, like, for example, this is not really insecurity, but when Docker was becoming deprecated in Kubernetes, that whole mess that comes out with it of getting ahead, it really matters. And it's one of the struggles if you have something that is, like if you have an exploit that makes its way into, let's say the internet, the social medias and all this stuff, really hard to walk it back and make sure that you get out ahead of the conversation, because now I'm like, I still have to go do research on this update and figure out if I'm vulnerable. So I'll try to see if Maybe I'll try this later and see if I'm vulnerable to this exploit because I haven't done the update yet. Nobody get on my network.
It does seem pretty bad. I don't have anything Microsoft, so I'm good. Yeah, I'll have to rely on you to take that Python script for a spin.
Yeah, you do have to be on the private network. That is the other aspect. I believe that was my reading. So if anybody has any more information, because I am a Linux guy at heart.
Ah, okay. Yeah, it looks cool. Yeah. It's a really interesting. It is funny when it's like, it's bad. Here's a fix. No, it's not. No, you set it up wrong. And by the way, probably your intern set that up wrong as well. So
yeah,
not our fault.
Yeah, right. It's not you, it's me, right? It's that whole conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. I didn't even know that when it happens. You I don't know how you do it. You always seem to find a Microsoft problem every show. Congratulations.
Yeah, does Microsoft create a problem for us every show?
We must send them flowers or a thank you card.
Yeah, we owe them. So this is all. We didn't actually have too many crazy news because other than somebody doing something crazy with fireworks, it's been a little bit of a less WTF past week. But yeah, I thought this one was interesting because it kind of bleeds into our big spender section. But Gartner acquires Pulse.
Yeah, we kept this in the WTF section.
Yeah, we did.
As opposed to if you were getting excited to hear a little bit of Shirley Bassey there. You had a good take on this, so I'm going to let you grab it.
Sure. Yeah. So Pulse does a lot of surveys and a lot of business intelligence and collection of information. They do surveys. They do them really well. I've worked at a bunch of companies who have used them, and Gartner has acquired them. The purchase price, I have no clue what it is, but obviously Gartner I know Gartner's in the billions, right, in terms of valuation. Yeah. So I think it's pretty interesting just because now you're going to be able to pair, let's say, security information with customer feeling too, right? So it's not just Gartner saying, hey, we don't think your solution is secure, but also here are some of the big enterprises who don't want to use the solution or who trust the solution. Because I think that customer sentiment matters so much, especially with everything being online. You're not really interacting with things as much. So it's not just enough to have a secure solution. You have to have a credible, secure solution, right? I think that pairing of information is going to be interesting. Also, if you want to use Pulse, put your orders in now because it's about to get expensive.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, a lot of moolah. Speaking of the money.
Hey, let's get to the first one. This is kind of an exciting discussion point generally. R2C Series B funding, 27 million, not that much, right? But if we look at the popularity of R2C and the popularity of SemGrep, which is now the GitLab's default SaaS tool, it's interesting as to where these guys are going. I quite like them. That's probably wrong for me to say that, but I like them for how it works. What if I just jump back here? All right, cool. So you get a kind of a dumbed down version of what they're doing as R2C. They're a little like Bridge Crew, in the way that, except for code. Mm-hmm. So as you start doing things, you can start to create these. It's almost like, grep, right? The clue's in the word grep. Mm-hmm. But they're able to find things and auto change and auto create pull requests with better code examples built into GitHub or GitLab or whatever you want, right? And there's a lot of really good articles. You're never going to know how to spell this. I should probably find it. Parsha Hackman, who's he used to be a very in-depth Black Hat guy who worked at Synopsys. He's done an article recently just talking about how SemGrep rocks, right? Probably good he doesn't work at Synopsys anymore because they had a SaaS tool. But it's very interesting how it is configurable. And I think it takes a company like R2C to wrap some sense or rules. Imagine like Chekhov on its own. You'd be like, all right, where do I start? How many rules? But the fact that this has a lot of cool rules and allows you to extend it very easily, and you can see an example of how that works, how you can create rules.
It's kind of like a Grammarly for code.
Yeah,
hey,
it is.
You can't use printf. Like I'm watching this video. It's actually a well done video. Hey, you can't use printf. You need to use our logging specific functionality, right? I mean, it's honestly really good for onboarding too. Imagine if you're coding, it's just like, hey, here are all the rules. I'm assuming that they're going to build this functionality into GitLab, so you can have a dashboard and it will just propagate into your different repos, and
everything on GitLab is being migrated over. I've already seen, like, so that it's the default. And what I like is that they support. So if you look at Go, Ruby, TypeScript, Python, they right away they hit, or JavaScript as well. TypeScript, JavaScript. They're already hitting the cloud native languages. So I will not be surprised if we're talking about a Series C like soon, or that is outrageous because of security money at the moment, or we just see them get acquired totally.
Yeah.
So we should plug episode 5 of DSO Overflow podcast. We just found out.
Oh yeah.
Michael Mann interviews Clint from the R2C team. So go check that out on all good podcast sources. DSO Overflow. We should have done that before the show.
I gotta go check that out now. Yeah. Damn.
So it's pretty. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. 27 million. Yeah, it's not that much.
Right. It's tiny. It's actually, I would say, if you're looking to get into application security, code analysis, and R2C are looking for people, hot time to probably get on board that team.
Cool.
Alrighty.
I mean,
so we move.
We went from a little bit of moolah to like a little bit more moolah. So yeah, you put this one in. You want to take the reins on this one?
Yeah, sure. I can do this. There we go. Versus 102 million to continue. This is rare. I didn't even read the title. Continue building the next web together.
I was also going to point out that R2C had the shift left. We had the buzzword bingo on R2C's announcement.
Oh, did we?
Yeah, it's like shift left. You know. On the previous one. Oh no, there it is. Shift left with fast static analysis. There you go. Mark it off.
I printed out the card so that if we get next time we have to know in advance, I'll have to tell you to print out the bingo card in advance so that we can sit here and on all these things and collect some bingo stats on how much money companies get versus how they tick on the bingo card. I think that's analysis worth buying right there.
For sure.
Okay, Vercel. Let me do this just so that they're an interesting company again. That is this them? That's not them. I was going to just jump right to them. I thought there was a link on this page so we could.
Well, I mean, you can just click on their homepage if you wanted to go back and showcase a little bit more about them.
Let's just do that. So develop, preview, ship. They are I don't really know them, but they developed the JavaScript library, which is a React framework that is really easy to use to create enriched visuals. But then they also house your apps so you can and we'll deploy it for you. Cool.
Yeah. So I mean, React framework is obviously huge. And like, if you go to some of those really impressive websites, you're going to probably see some sort of aspect of that. And being able to do it and do it live. So as you're editing, you're seeing it for the developer. I mean, it's huge. All in one.
It's another one of these things where I was just like, all right, this is really good. Push to deploy, get your preview, see what it looks like. It's like you're doing WordPress, except you're developing super content rich applications. I think that's a good reference. Twilio. So Twilio uses Next.js. Like that's right there. That's a great reference.
Yeah, and I think you're getting to the point where everything is just at your fingertips. I mean, they're talking about caching and serverless functions, right? You're getting to that point where the developer itself is understanding how you're building the site out and what's working in the cloud and where what's being cached where and pushing it directly into this app, which will run and host it and make all the adjustments for them, right? So Yeah, it works with 30 plus Jamstack frameworks. If you've been to stackrocks.io, like we're using the Jamstack framework. So it's yeah, it's a pretty cool and very sleek way of designing it. I think so. If you go to like stackrocks.io, it's a single page, right? Loads super quick, single page. You have all the information, which the nice thing about that is everything's cached if you want it to be. So you get super quick download time. One of the downsides of a site like that, obviously, is tracking. So obviously, we don't really care about tracking on an open source website. But
well,
yeah,
very
so
well done.
Yeah, it's just
that was fast.
Quick. Yeah. And that's across the pond for you, technically.
Yeah. That should have been way slower.
Yeah, and so now it's cached and it's a single page, and yeah, it's quick. Anyways, that's one of the benefits of it is you can build these really, really complex websites, cache them in different spots, and so then you get like the tracking that way if you're building complex websites, but you get that reactive framework, very interactive, and it doesn't slow down for the user. And anybody else can correct me if I'm wrong. That was my take, but yeah. So it's cool.
Makes sense. I like it.
And probably why they got 100 million in Series C.
Yes, I would think that is fair. All right. We are at our last thing.
Copilot. So are you ready for...
Does everybody know what time it is?
Yeah, super excited for this. Cool time.
All right, let me just bring this up as a discussion point. Sorry, if I just keep looking down, it's because it's 5:45 here, and my dog knows that it's dinner time. So she's kind of body slamming my leg right now.
Yeah.
All right. So she's gone away, which is good. So AI. So have you seen much of this? Is kind of all over the place at the moment, and the moment it came across my radar, I obviously clicked sign up and said, hell yeah, I will play with this. And then 2 days ago, I got access to the preview repo and started to play with it. It looks cool because it's like you type some code. It takes both what you've written here, but also the comments above. And even I found the import statements that you've written above, and uses its understanding of that to start to suggest not just like lines of code, but entire functions worth of code. And I was like, okay, must play.
It really makes sense too when it's talking about packages. Like if you're saying import a specific package, I mean, it's gonna look and say, okay, well, people in GitHub who use, let's say, the Go Cobra package, they tend to write CLIs. Here are a lot of the functions that they're going to use. So you can kind of understand where it's going with it. Pretty cool. Anyways, I'm super excited to check this out. So
all right. So just let me give you that's the positive news. Let's go for some of the darker news. This was Autopilot exposing. It's not Autopilot, it's Copilot, but exposing secrets, and then everyone starts going. The conspiracy theorists 2 days ago. I'm not convinced that this was trained on private data yet. Wasn't trained. Well, I don't know if that guy's, you know what he's saying. He's like, it should have been trained on public data, not private data.
Other way around?
Because, yeah, the other way around. And there is, if I have the Twitter up, there's a bunch of debate on Twitter here saying, with proof, this is like what you said with the malware earlier. How much of this is real?
LOL.
Right? So this is I tried to tell it to get me secrets, and it did. So it's trying to get, this is for SimGrid or something like that, was trying to use SendGrid. Yeah, it's using SendGrid. So it started filling in.
Oh no.
Private. Well, you shouldn't have your secrets in GitHub anyway. Like, what are you doing? So this is why people are suggesting that it's using private repos as well as public repos. And then this isn't, I don't think this is in this list, but I found this XKCD.
Is docs at midnight on June 20th. Ha! Found them. Yeah, that is awesome. So true.
I thought, okay. So I did try to do some things. This is me playing with YAML. So let's go to their example. So you got their example here where they said, try doing this with JavaScript. So I'm like, all right, fine. And look, I didn't do anything. And in fact, as I type, it starts to get better.
Mm.
And if I like it, I can accept it. If I don't like it, it will. You can't see it, but if that's had another alternative, it would offer me an alternative. But I can just go, whoop, yeah, tab, and I get it. And it's cool. Just that alone is like, what? Because that's cool. Now I did notice that if you do this, and I delete all this, all right. Anyone?
Oh, it doesn't come back.
Nothing. Oh, there we go.
Oh, just took a little while.
Cool. Just took longer because it didn't have to find it.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like if you're typing on an iPhone or something like that, and you don't like the suggestion, and you go and you backspace and you go again, it will give you. It'll be like, oh, okay, you don't want my suggestion.
Well, let's check it out. Right.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Another one. Do I like that better?
Just a little
shake that one.
Bracket, yeah.
Like, so you get to cycle through the ones you might want. So now we're doing time instead of days. So it's like, okay, this is pretty cool, right? And then you accept the one you want. So you think I like that one. So now I'm writing stuff. So that was really quite neat. I didn't get that by looking at the website. I started writing this nothing. Oh, it's blank. Okay, that's because I killed it all. So I had recently written this for us, and it was just a little scrape function to scrape all the blogs off of the CNCF website, right? So I could look at them easier. And I thought, I wonder what it would have wrote. So I came over here and I was like, all right, let's see if this backfires. Because I found it had okay, so now it's suggesting imports. I don't know if I need that one, but now because it suggested it, I want it to feel like it's part of the plan, right? And then I typed import BS4. Is that what I want? That's what I want. I always forget the name of this one. It's going to be over here. I'll just steal it. PS4. That's right. PS4. Yeah. And then it added a comment.
It tells you.
And I thought, I want beautiful soup, which is what I want. So screw that. From BS4, it knew I wanted beautiful soup. So I was like, all right, that's pretty cool. I think that's what I want. And then I tried this comment. So we're going to grab all that crap. So let's say I type that. And maybe, I don't know if it likes me pasting like that. So I'm just going to.
Why don't you, I was going to say, take the comment out and just go to the.
Wait, I don't have to.
Oh, never mind. I got it.
Look. It's going to grab my URL, read from it, pull out HTML from beautiful soup, grab the title, and for some reason, it's just, so this is where I was like, this is where my mind started to get a little bit blown by this, because it's not instant, and it's different. How weird, right?
Can you cycle through them? Yeah, there. Okay, so you can just hit Command bracket to go through them. Nice.
Let's see if I'm getting the one I want, and I'm like, all right, that's a bit simpler. That's a much simpler example from what I would want.
I liked Kelsey Hightower's take on it. Was Copilot is to coders what a calculator is to mathematicians. Because I mean, you need to know what to look for. You need to know how to, like, if the code is correct. Like, this is not a fix-all tool that's going to take your jobs. They're not going to take your jobs.
Take your job. Yeah, I don't know, but some of it And I'm not even seeing, so the one I accepted had all these try catch blocks in it. And I'm not even seeing that one this time. That's probably the closest one.
Mm.
But it was pretty cool. So I just like did that and went, all right. So I'm almost where I want to be. The only thing that's wrong was that the thing with Beautiful Soup is that you're looking for particular tags on divs. So it's never going to know what my destination website looks like because I know what it looks like. I know I need that. So it's just a little bit of investigation, and I'm almost done the function I wrote here to do the exact same thing. It's just except for the fact that I'm looking for an Ahref, but that certainly gets me the structure I want faster than what it took me to write it in the first place, like way faster.
Yeah.
And so
it's interesting that I wonder if it was like reinforced learning. I don't think it's a proper term for ML, but like if somebody sat there and said, okay, this is good code, or this is bad code, or this is the way you're supposed to write, this is proper, right? I think they just assume, obviously over the span of how much code that it looked at, that this is the proper way to kind of space things out. But it's kind of interesting that you're going to be pushing, let's say, a specific way of writing code on people with this. Let's say this gets like wide adoption. Well, then is everybody going to have the same functions written? Is there going to kind of be like three mains that just, so it's just kind of going to get to the point where we know exactly what code's written all the time?
Yeah, it's a bubble. AI and ML create bubbles. Like Facebook's a bubble. Everything is. If you write some innovative new code badly, but you're the only example, then suddenly everyone, as soon as it tips over to being used again, now there's two versions of yours. So you now have almost quorum on what the answer should be, even though it's crap or insecure.
Yeah.
And GitHub doesn't know that, or does it? And I think that's the question I'm asking. Does GitHub have some sort of notion of where it's using its own built-in security tools, like SEML, I think is the one they use by default? Is it checking its own solutions yet? Or will that be something that's relying on the end user? Like I do this, I now have this code, I check it in, and I can use some of my own and some of GitHub's built-in security tools to tell me that the code you just suggested to me is crap.
Yeah, I was kind of mentioning this, I think, either to you or somebody else, but the next step obviously is to have some sort of security alert or flag, like when you're importing things, right? Let's say you're importing Beautiful Soup and it's like, hey, the maintainers haven't touched this in a year and there's a couple CVEs associated with this, right? Now where you get the CVEs in the database for the CVEs obviously changes. So that's another issue I think is kind of interesting. Like let's say you go into GitHub and you push your code and they use a specific database for this, for mostly like Python or Go vulnerabilities. That might be different from GitLab's database. So correlating CVEs and understanding is also a challenge. I understand why they went for the base use case of developer enablement first, obviously. But I think there is a lot of room in that space to say, hey, like you're importing this. Are you sure? Here are the dependencies. Here's where it's pulling from. We verified things, right? Or like, I don't know if it's ever going to get to the point where it's like signed, like the packages and package managements are signed, but it's another sort of space. It's pretty cool overall. The YAMLs and the declarative aspect, I find probably the most applicable in a weird way because there is so much standardization. Almost like the easiest use case, especially for security, right? I mean, you get like what Bridge Crew's doing. It's like, hey, we're going to recommend a YAML to you and we're going to tell you what you should alert on and be aware of. It's pretty much what you're doing, minus the total recommendation part that Copilot has, right? It's almost like
I think it's cool. I was going to try and show YAML, but I played with it beforehand and I wasn't getting any recommendations. So maybe it's not quite super ready yet. And I think we mentioned, I saw a few online examples where people are using Markdown. I'm like, that's just too simple. That's not even entertaining as a demo.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was better to try and rewrite a function I wrote in Python and see that I got 3 versions that look nothing like mine.
Yeah.
So we'll see about that. I'll check my version in.
Yeah,
Then you can start using my code.
If there's an AI that can just give me great deployment examples for YAML off the bat whenever I type something and isn't like an Nginx default, that'd be great. I would love that. Source of insecure code practice. Yeah.
It already is.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Scorpio, thanks for joining. We were kind of touching on that before. And yeah, there's just it's a good recommendation, but it's not going to outsource or take away from developers. I think it's an interesting tool to have to play around with too, but not quite there.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. If you look at, well, the combination of what R2C is doing for security and what Copilot is doing just for straight up like code and comments and just cleanliness. Yeah, it's interesting to see where it's going. I wonder. I just wonder. I'm really curious. I want to find. It's one of these things where I see it now. It looks cool. I'm sure it's gonna. If the baseline is GitHub's entire history, I wonder how far back it goes. I wonder if it's programmed just to ignore everything from earlier than 2 years ago because it's gonna be like so bad practice.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, things are constantly changing. People have different frameworks, write functions differently. So yeah, there's obviously suggestions that aren't going to work for you. I think for the basic suggestions, like if you're writing like the date time one, I think is a perfect example of something that Copilot would be extremely useful for. Once you get into a little bit more complex and let's say unique use cases, probably not the same, but
yeah,
the R2C and the R2C example of like, if you were to say, hey, here's an AI to suggest a bunch of functions, but I want the AI to stay within these bounds of what to recommend for best practice for our code base at our company, for example, I think that's massive. Like if you could have both of those to say, hey, you're like a new intern, here's a week. We want you to go and just play with the code base in this container and see what the recommendations are and see how it all functions. Imagine pairing that if you were like on some sort of React framework or something like that, or some Jamstack, where it's like, you think about this, like you have, what was the company that we just talked about?
R2C?
No, the other one.
Oh, Vercel.
Vercel. Like you have Vercel, so it's live on your local host with a Jamstack, and then it's doing all these recommendations, and you can go and play around and watch AI as it takes you through all the recommendations and how you write things. And it's like, hey, I want to play with this. And it's like, nope, you can't do that. That's against our type of editing, or it'll do suggestions. That's pretty sweet if we get there.
Yeah. So this is it. I want to fast forward. I want to go have a nap, go look at 2023, see what all of these tools look like at that phase. That'll be pretty cool. All right. By the way, just so you know, I did put a whole bunch of stuff in there. I didn't want to do it on the show. Like I put RSA key, I put all sorts of open SSH key. I really baited it to try and get it to spit out anything that would do it, and it did not. You probably will not be surprised. Just do like I did. I'm not showing my screen anymore. I did. Let me just share again. I wrote things like this. I just started writing URL, and then I wrote API key, and rather than give me a key, it tried to get it out of the environment. See, smarter. So I did have a little bit of a go with it to try and get it to reveal something nasty so we could have an exclusive, but it could be that people are just being trolls about the fact that it actually is revealing keys. Who knows? Yeah.
And I mean, if you're trusting, I think the point is like, you can't just like rely on AI to do all the work for you. It's still a long ways away. And it honestly is trained on humans who write code. So it's going to have the same issues, right?
Yeah, it's not. It's a bit unfair to say, oh, they're basing it on private repos. That's why it's revealing keys. I'm like, no, if it's revealing keys, it's because it's basing it on idiots in public repos who are putting keys in their code.
Mm-hmm. Checks out.
Right. Yeah. And that's our last thing. Was there anything you wanted me to type? You were curious, like, Steve, type this and see if Copilot does it, or was that satisfactory for you?
That was satisfactory for me. I think it's pretty cool, and I'm going to go play around with it this weekend as well. So, if I break it, I'll let you know, and you can come check us out next week.
Hey, all right, cool.
And watch us break other stuff and talk about some crazy WTFs. I'm sure that the news cycle is going to pick up, and I mean, we'll probably be following that the Microsoft hack for a while. So, pretty cool.
All right, very good point. If you want to get in contact, we're on Twitter, YouTube, and that is the email if you want to write us with amazing subjects, or you want to be a guest in the show because you happen to work at GitHub and you know how Copilot works. Contact us. We'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, and thanks for joining. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. And again, you can catch all the clips and links on YouTube. My name is Mike Foster.
I'm Steve Jaguar.
Have a good one.